I think a lot of people don't realize conversion therapy is still very much alive.
Truth be told, her experience intersects debate between evangelicals and the LGBTQ plus community. She's queer, she's fierce, and she's a Christian too. This is going to be a good one. Julie Rodgers, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Tony, thank you. This is an absolute blast.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to get into this. For viewers who don't know, you're featured in the Netflix documentary Pray Away, highlighting your experience along with so many others involved in what's called the ex-gay movement. So just really, how has life been since the documentary came out for you?
Whew. So
That
it was
says
a
it
lot.
all.
I mean, it was a lot to sort of, put some of the most traumatic parts of my experience and story out there. And I think in many ways it was so moving and so beautiful to see people begin to locate their own narratives in my story and to say like, oh my God, this is giving language to something that I didn't necessarily know had happened to me, and I just thought something was wrong with me and that I wasn't well adjusted or something. And now I'm realizing I went through this traumatic experience too. And so many people coming out with their own religious trauma and things like that. And so on the one hand, that's been like so moving and so powerful. And also it was also a lot for me to deal with because I don't really, I was telling, one part of telling a story, but also I wasn't quite equipped for just all of the emotional responses I would get, whether those were positive or people feeling really triggered, honestly. I think especially a lot of survivors, like that is a really triggering world to tap back into. So to just be able to sort of like absorb some of that pain and anger as well was a lot for my little body. So I am like honored, I'm grateful, and I'm also resting and recovering from what was a really big emotional push.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about that rest in a minute, but a question you're probably used to, but a little strange to hear out loud. Tell me more about the ex-gay movement. What's behind it? And in your experience, why is it so, in the end, so destructive for people who are involved in that?
I'm glad you asked because I think a lot of people don't realize conversion therapy is still very much alive. There have been some bans at the state level for minors among licensed practitioners. So that's really just like licensed professional therapists. That is not the main place conversion therapy is happening, though. The main place it's happening is in churches, nonprofits, and religious communities that are protected by religious freedom laws. So there's a lot of research. The Williams Institute out of UCLA is a great place to go if you want to better understand the numbers around that. But it's so insidious because it's not like some of, there have been a few movies come out that like are sort of like the shock therapy, the sort of like outrageous, sensationalized version of it. And of course, there is like a very small minority of people who've experienced that in recent decades. That was more like from the 70s and whatnot. But now it's more insidious in the sense of you just grow up and everything you hear from your family, from the religious leaders who you look to for moral guidance, who you look to for a sense of feeling good in yourself. Like all of these people, your friends, your social group are saying that you're broken, you're disgusting, and you need to change in order to find love and belonging in their circles. And so many of us would put ourselves in these programs where we're going to a weekly prayer group, we're going to a weekly support group that looks kind of like AA meeting youth group. We're going to weekly counseling sessions with a pastor, and we're just throwing all of ourselves, all of our energy into this effort to try to change, to live a straight looking life, and ultimately just feeling more and more at war within ourselves. And then eventually when you do come out, you lose so many of those communities. So it's truly devastating. It wreaks havoc on the lives of hundreds of thousands of people in the United States alone. And I'm so thankful for the documentary and for you for bringing attention to it.
Totally. And listen, the documentary is just one part of that, but you literally wrote the book on this. The title of your book is Out Love, a queer Christian survival story, and it's an incredibly personal memoir. But you've already used the word in this conversation, survive and survival. Why was it important for you to use that word for the book and how you describe your experience?
I think it highlights a sense of, it highlights the resiliency of those of us who have gone through these things. And it gives a sense of agency and empowerment to move forward with our lives now. Because honestly, like, you don't go through those kinds of experiences without having some baggage. And there are coping mechanisms that we all turn to get through it. There are ways that we've brought things into our adult relationships that are like not ideal, because we were formed, all these important developmental years were spent in a community that tried to erase us. And ultimately, yeah. So the fact that we didn't kill, we weren't annihilated, we made it. And not only that, but we are thriving on the other side of it. And I like the word survival because it sort of is a way of creating a sense of like gentleness with ourselves for the ways that our baggage persists, and ways of honoring the whole of who we are as imperfect people who are also so strong and so resilient and so beautiful. I feel like it allows for more complexity than something like victim, which just kind of leaves you flailing.
Totally. And here you are on the other side. You are thriving. How are you maintaining that mental space, that mental health? You've already used the word also rest, and we talked before we started recording about gifting yourself and your being time. Talk about that process and how you are able to gift that to yourself.
Yeah. I mean, well, Tony, I've spent a lot of time in therapy, like actual, real, with a real legitimate licensed professional therapist. And that's one of the greatest gifts I've given myself. And I'm also grateful for therapists who will offer sliding scales for those of us who aren't financially on top of things. And so that's been a big part of my process. And also just like being a whole integrated person, like in community, being in touch with my body, being present every day and saying like, oh my God, this is where life is happening. This is where there's a sense of possibility. Anything is possible today and among the people I'm meeting. And that way of thinking of like healing is an ever-present, ongoing process that we are offering ourselves and one another now. Like healing isn't tomorrow. Healing isn't next year. Healing, like it's not about some future version of ourselves. And so I've just been really rooted in that because I think it's so easy to just escape. Oh my God, there's Toby.
Welcome to the conversation. I love it.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's been a big part of my process. Not living in the past, not looking to the future, but looking to what's available and what's possible today. And it turns out there's a lot.
Yeah. And speaking of, and talking about being part of communities at large, right? How are you able to reconcile your sexuality and faith? What was that like for you?
It's an ongoing process, and I tend to be really honest with people. I'm a teaching fellow at a really cool organization for people who are interested in sort of dipping their toe back in a progressive faith organization. It's called the Faith and Justice Network out of San Francisco, and it's mostly online. But they're doing a lot of interesting work around like decolonizing our faith and dealing with white supremacy and just like the patriarchy and homophobia and how all of that is how it affects every single system and structure in our society and how it's all inside of us in different ways, how we've internalized those things. And so I think that has helped me. That feels so true. It's so resonate when I look at everything happening in the news. When I look at my own life and relationships, I see how important that is for my own growth and healing, and also in my work and desire for justice and restoration in the world around me. So I think because I have found some faith communities that are doing that work, it's kept me involved because honestly, there's so much like baggage tied up in ideas of like God and the afterlife and prayer and what's happening in on those ways that like it's really hard to know if I'm just making it up because so many of the leaders that were in my life for the first couple decades were truly making shit up that was harmful. And then I would be like, oh, that's God talking to me. And it was just this really homophobic leader who had some real issues. And so for me, it's been more about finding communities that are working for justice, restoration, and healing right now in our actual communities and being like, that is something leading to healing. That's something I can get involved with. And if a community is religious or spiritual and it's causing harm, I think we should get as far away from it as possible.
All things considered, based on who you are today, what would you say, Julia Rodgers, is your truth? Who is Julie today?
I am deeply loved. And I think like you have to resonate with this. Like when you've gone through so much trauma and you internalize so much shame and you just think like, man, people will never love me if they know this truth about me or this thing that I'm holding or carrying or this fucked up thing I did. Like it's such a lie. And it's so beautiful to find that you can share your truth and you can come out and you can say all that's true about you, all these things that are bringing you that sense of shame. And you find out that in that place, you're deeply, deeply loved. And it's one of the most beautiful truths in the whole world. And I'm thankful you're doing this, Tony. I'm thankful for you're doing that in your own life and creating these spaces and creating spaces for that truth to be shared in every different sphere of our lives, because that's what's going to heal us.
And it is about healing so much. Julie, thank you for this conversation. I appreciate you so much. Virtual hugs through the camera here. I can't wait to hug you IRL. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
All right, Tony. Cheers.
To see more Truth Be Told, check us out at pluslifemedia.com and follow us on social media at pluslifemedia. Until next time, let your truth be told.